Mhm.
Hello and welcome to our inaugural episode of Unlearning Labels. I'm Cordelia Gaffar and I'm here today with Peter and Mira Griffiths.
Welcome and thank you for joining us, everyone. The podcast mission is not to offer solutions, but to offer a safe space to have conversations that impact organizations and deconstruct the issues they face. In this way, companies can better understand the challenges, see where they stand, and how we can help them. Each month, on the last Wednesday, excuse me, we dive into defining an aspect of allyship and diversity. Tune in as a team and make it part of your monthly staff meeting. And now for the show.
Yeah, so welcome everyone. Welcome to our inaugural episode. And we wanted to just unpack, I guess, the way it's going to roll for the 12 episodes. You can say a bit about this, Cordelia, right? That not only are we going to do one a month, but actually on Clubhouse, we're going to do weekly Clubhouse rooms. And we're going to open up the floor and have really meaningful discussions about the topics that are really close to your heart.
Yeah, but you know what, Peter? I think we should always start with definitions, right? So, like, how did our conversation about this start? It was like, well, what are the labels? What are the labels that others attach to us? What are the labels that we attach to ourselves? And, kind of like, like the label of leader. We were talking about that this morning, right? And, usually people have an association with what it means to be a good leader. I guess in a way, right, Mira, it's like we self-identify and put others in categories and boxes with labels.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. And then when you identify, you have this idea of a leader, for example, and then you either fit or you don't fit in a box. And if you want to be a leader, you need to be like that one in the box on the label. And then you have all sorts of ideas about are you good or not good. And often labels can be helpful. Obviously, that's why we do these things in our minds. We label things. You don't want to be looking at a poisonous snake. You want to run away from it because you know that it fits under the label of poisonous snake. But at the same time, we in the other situations in work and life and who we are, it can be quite limiting. And because of it, we really want to talk about it on this show.
Yeah.
We want to unpack it so we understand, what it is. Is that really label that suits us, and how the world looks like when we unlabel ourselves and we learn or unlearn labeling that we have about other people.
I like the way you said that. And, like to your point, like if we were to take that poisonous snake and make it a human, right? That's the problem when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Because then, you become like a Black employee or an immigrant employee or a white employee or a man or a woman. And then, the association with those labels become limiting, like you said, but not always in a good way.
Yeah. So what we really want is really to unpack it, to see what it is and what it isn't. So it opens up a space for ourselves and for our Peter people to unleash much more of their potential than what is really stuck under this tight, limiting little label. Yeah.
And should we share some of our experience in terms of labels that we have? Because we were having a discussion offline earlier today. And I'll talk about mine, for example. So when I was a bit younger, I had Sorry about that. I had an experience in the education system that wasn't so positive. So if I'm honest, I actually spent most of my life until a few, maybe 10 years ago, thinking that I wasn't enough because I got told by teachers, adults, etc. But luckily for me, I was strong-willed, strong-minded. And I guess that's what got me into being curious about psychology, coaching, creativity, stuff like this. And then I learned later on that actually the education system isn't as scary as I once thought, and that education's really amazing. It's just that I was given certain labels and I actually believed them for, quite a big chunk of my life.
Is there any other labels?
Yeah, I think being a white male, talking about diversity as well, if I'm honest, used to make me feel uncomfortable. But then Mira and I were talking about it, that Mira said, didn't you spend nearly 20 years of your adult career as a leader developing diverse teams and making people feel psychologically safe and getting the best out of people? And I was like, yeah, okay, maybe I know a little bit about this stuff then, Yeah.
How about you, Cordelia?
Well, before I talk about me, I just want to say, Peter, like what was limiting for you being a white male talking about diversity? Like what part of that was a problem for you?
A bit of imposter syndrome, and honestly thinking, well, okay, I'm well traveled. And again, I had, good experience in managing people internationally. But for whatever reason, I kind of felt a little bit uncomfortable getting into those conversations because it was kind of like, who am I to, I felt the weight of that label of me. Well, I'm just a white male. Why can I get into a topic about, a certain demographic? But then the more curious I got about what I didn't know, and the fact I was willing to listen, that's when I was, the gift of getting new information. And I learned a lot just by getting into certain conversations that if I wouldn't have normally got into before. But it's not as scary just for people listening or watching. It's not as scary as you once think. You might have thoughts and feelings about certain labels. But the more I was just listening to understand people that were totally different than me, I realized that these labels are not fixed as well. As Mira said, it's good to have them as a frame of reference. That's how we get to know what's good and bad, etc. But even good and bad, it's not black and white, right? It's for me, it's it's totally made up. That's all I'm saying. That the more you get curious about, is that label really true? Or at least, what I'm saying to me, I'm having an internal dialogue and saying that label that I've kind of been telling that story to myself, for quite a long time. Is it true? And then just to get into dialogue with other human beings, you get to learn new information. And a lot of the times I was like, wow, these labels are actually made up.
So like from my perspective, I wanted to ask you that question because in my experience, it has been white males, right, who have the face of power, right, who have actually advocated for me. So you have to be curious, like you said, and you have to have the courage to have those difficult conversations so that you can be allies for people like me. So like some of the labels I didn't really associate with myself until, I guess if I want to talk about when I was working, right? It's just like I was in my 20s. I'm like, yeah, I'm just like this really smart person, right? Until I moved to Washington, D.C., and I found out that I'm a cheeky Black woman. And then I kind of took that on, and then I even became an angry Black woman. And I was just like, I have an opinion and I'm, speaking up. And like I said, if it weren't for, some of the white males in my there was a particular when I worked in law firms, there was a partner and he took me aside and he's like, look, Cordelia, you need to build a constituency. And this is how you do it. And these are the people that have to be there. And so, basically this concept of allyship that is like a new concept, I learned this when I was 24. So this is who we need to be. And then I would have to say, even after corporate, like since I've left in the past 20 years or so, I should have said like this. Anyway, it's like, well, now I'm a mother, right? And then, which again, I was like, I'm a mother, right? Until I found out, like, even how we as mothers, sometimes we devalue what that means, We don't see ourselves as leaders, although we are leaders of our household and we are leading the next generation, right? So these are ways where, imposter syndrome, I'm like, I'm not a leader, I'm just a mom, even though I have enough kids that, like, I think I only need a few more for a full basketball team or most any sports team, So it's like waiting, what the label is. So,
Yeah.
before we get to you, Mira, I just wanna, acknowledge we have Natalie here with us from Munich.
Hey, Natalie.
Hello, thank you for joining us. And also for those of you who are watching live, either on YouTube or on LinkedIn, feel free to put your questions or comments, and we'll address any labels that you may be associating or disassociating from. So Mira, what are the labels that you took on for yourself?
Oh, plenty. Where do I start? But I guess the big ones, and I guess it's something that it's what's going on in the world. I was a refugee as a kid, as I was teenager when it's all blown up and started, and I have for a really big part of my life associated myself, like not associated, I saw myself as a refugee, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I added things to, who is a refugee? And then I added bits of what it means to refugee, things that I've heard from people that were angry at refugees at the first time, again, they lost jobs. They thought refugees are in charge of it for whatever reason. As a refugee, I'm not supposed to have any money. As a refugee, you can't say this, or you don't have these rights, or you have to struggle because otherwise people are, you're not supposed to do, you're not. And so I've struggled with money, with self-esteem, with what can I do in life. And I wanted to do all these things and talk to people and empower people and help them. But then I had, who am I to do that? Because I'm nobody, and so that was a label that was really limiting to me in terms of my profession, in terms of how I thought about myself. And you could say that was an imposter syndrome in a way, because how can I as a refugee sit in a boardroom, and stuff like that. So and I did it, I don't know how, but it happened. And it really the turning point was when I started unlabeling myself, when I started unpicking that, yes, I was a refugee as a child, and I can still say, I come from that background, and I can still say that label in certain situations where it's really meaningful and important. But I don't have to pack all that meaning with it. You can acknowledge it, but you can't change the way you look, for example, as well. But you don't need to pack all that meaning on yourself. And I also found that once I did that with myself, it was much easier to see other humans as humans and not their labels instead, So, yeah. And what else would be refugee? Yeah, I'll stick with that one for now. I'll find more.
That's a pretty powerful one. And I guess what you're really pulling out there, Mira, is the self-awareness piece, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the more self-aware you are of what that terminology is doing to your psyche and the way you're showing up in the world, then you can understand, how that must feel for someone else. And I guess it helps you to be more compassionate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just, opens up different perspectives. Like I can now do things that they would be totally impossible for me in the past, but and so I can allow other people to do things that in the past I thought it would be, that person cannot do this because blah, 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 or, they would not be suited for this position because we were just, yes, Natalie, I took control of my narrative. And so, yeah, you see other people differently as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now we have, gone from looking at ourselves a certain way. And then, I'm pretty sure, like for me, I still have categories of people, but it more looks like mean or evil, but still, we need to move away from the adjectives, just say no to the adjectives, Um,
Mm,
and then just allow ourselves to be part of the human club. So
mm.
what about you, Peter? Like when you um, unlearned your labels, or are you still unlearning your labels? Let's go there.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely still unlearning my labels, like Mira said, and all of us, right? There's always things that I'm probably not aware of, right? Unconsciously, there's things that I'm still working on. And the way I look at this, it's a lifelong act of just being curious. And you said it there, Cordelia. Just the only label that's meaningful for me is human. I can own that badge, with pride and say, I'm a human being. And I think that's the leveler for me. We've all got other labels, or people might put us into pigeonholes, and there are uses for that. But as soon as you connect with another human being on any level, just by listening and learning about, what makes them tick, you then connect with them. It's a human connection, So all of the labels melt away. Not that they're not important for that person's journey, because they are, right? But also saying is that those labels, whatever you've been working on, they just melt away. And then you realize that you've got a deep connection with humanity. And that's kind of what we're pointing to. That for me, it's been a lifelong journey as an adult to kind of unlearn some of these layers,
Mm. Mm. And you know what, I'm kind of, because I know Peter and Peter's work with teams, I've noted, and then again, my own work with teams, and Cordelia, I would imagine for you as well, is when you get curious about people and you don't just believe that narrative, or you come in with people without the narrative, you come in clear-headed. And so they start showing so much more that they even knew that they could do. Like, in order to allow people to grow and to grow them, to help them grow with your help as a leader, you need to be able to see past that narrative that you may have had. And so if you really want to build teams, if you really want to grow people, if you want to grow yourself, you need to pass the limits of that label. Otherwise, that's the limit. That's a lid, as you sometimes say. And so if you come in as a leader with a blank sheet, it is much easier to build that team. It's much, 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 much faster than when you have to. Otherwise, you have a really, really hard work, and then you change people, and then this person is not good, this person is not fit in, this person can't do that, But actually, when you come with a blank slate, you have much more opportunities. You show them things that they didn't know they knew. You open the new opportunities for people, and they will forever be grateful for you for it. And also, your job as a leader is much, much easier.
And crucially, you grow as a leader with your team as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because the more you touched on it before, Cordelia, it's about awareness, and it's a lifelong thing, or at least it is for me. I don't know about you two, but for me, it's just constantly being aware that I have to work on that. But when I say work on it, I don't mean like it's a pain in the neck, you know. I actually get excited about it, and I'm just, you know, why we're talking right now, I guess, that it's total curiosity and creativity for me. I see leadership as an innately creative endeavor. So for me, when I'm like, okay, I know I've got certain labels for me. I know that they're popping up when I'm interacting with my team. And this is when I was in the context of in a leadership position, but I'm just going to go with it. You know, I'm listening to these people. I'm constantly learning. And the more that I listen to the people that I was, I guess, in, you know, have a duty of care over, the more that they became relaxed and felt psychologically safe to share. And I got to learn more. I don't know if people have really thought about this, but the more that you listen and the more that people see that you're genuinely listening to understand, and you want to, you know, you don't even have to say it, because we were talking about this before, that you don't have to be as obvious. I see you, I appreciate you. It's just, if you're listening to understand, that comes as part of the package. That's a happy accident of actually having an open mind and being curious. And as you say, just wanting to be more aware, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That listening piece is really the key, right? Like, and listening full body, right? So a lot of time there's like all these practices of listening, but you know, just looking someone straight in the eye and turning your body towards them, you know, not being on any devices and just giving full attention to that person, that it, you know, there's so much in our nonverbal language that implies I care about you, I see you, and what you're saying matters, and that's really all it takes, like you said. And then for you as the listener, right, if you just make this your practice, so like if you're a team lead, when you have your one-on-ones, you know, with your team, just be in the practice of being full into, you know, turning your body towards them and just making it a dedicated time to give them your full undivided attention, and they'll feel your vibration. They'll feel the compassion and the empathy. And yeah, you won't have to say much.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I've seen some amazing things happening, and people solving problems and coming up with some amazing ideas just because they were given space and attention. And it's amazing. Like, my job has become so much easier and so much more fulfilling at the same time, and I'm just doing less. I'm doing less with people. I'm less doing, but I'm more there, if that
More
makes sense.
being, yeah.
Yeah.
I have to say that's the best part of leaving corporate and going into coaching, is like you can actually be with people and you can give them time and space so they can create their brilliance and be their brilliant self. And and you don't have to do anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point another comment out from Natalie, so thank you. She said listening equals insight, and with insight you can influence people. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
It makes your job so much easier.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. I mean, if you look at most of the things that impact diversity in an organization, it's usually because people don't feel like they've got a voice, right? And that's it. You know, the best gift you can give anyone in an organization is saying, you know, I hear you. And then a lot of the problems can be dealt with because you're already in dialogue and you have, like I said before, a human connection, right?
Yeah.
So, couple of things that we spoke about here. Is self-labeling and labeling others, and those two don't go apart. It's same like self-judgment and judging others and all of that stuff. Yeah. And so we had few conversations so far with people, and seeing what is important to them and how these labels have affected their job. And we spoke about, people came up with, I'm too old. People think I'm too old to understand them, or I'm too young. Nobody's listening to. I'm not important.
Or I haven't got enough experience.
I haven't got enough. Also, labeling people that have changed jobs, different industries, and then there's a label consistent with that goes, they are not consistent, they are changing, they don't have enough experience in one industry that we need, which is actually not true. And so what we want to go through these sessions is actually deconstruct these labels. So it would be useful to just hear from people that are listening right now, is what are some of the labels that come up right now for them when they're listening to this? Is there any particular one that could be interesting? Or Peter and Cordelia, do you have any?
Well, just to unpack what you said, I mean, that one kind of struck a chord with me, just to unpack that a little bit further and explain it. I got told that a lot because I lived in different countries. I changed careers. If I'm honest, I did because I didn't, again, back then I hadn't worked on myself as much as I have now. And I was telling myself I wasn't good enough. So I was changing to different careers because it never felt enough, right? But then when I look at it now, I've done a lot of recruitment in my time. I really respect people who've built up that resilience of living in a different country, learning about new cultures, but not just that, they've actually gone through a few different industries. And I'd much rather someone does that, because it shows that they've actually, like I say, built a bit of resilience, but they've also had some variety. So I just think people, organizations and recruiters, decision makers shouldn't be so uncomfortable if people have had a bit of a, I know it sounds cliche, but it's never a straight line, right? It's all squiggly, It's all over. I don't know, maybe because I resonate with that because it happened in my life as well. And remember the lady we spoke to who was in HR.
Right.
This was on Clubhouse, right? And she said that she'd had a really rich experience from what we heard in just 6-7 minutes. And I was like, I would hire you. I was kind of like, I would take you for a job. And she said that she wasn't able to get an entry-level job in HR, even though she'd been in quite senior leadership positions, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting. And so why is this label not helpful at all? It can be quite destructive, and companies can actually miss lots of opportunities, because people who have changed, so different industry, maybe they did a similar job but different industry, or they know how to transfer experience.
Right.
They're open to learning. They are open to connect with people on different levels, not just talk about this one particular thing, the job that they're doing, so they can connect on a different human level. What else is there? As you said, they're probably more resilient to change.
Right. So they're not incompetent. They're not inconsistent. Those are the labels that are attached to those people that have what is that called? Oh my goodness. There's another word for it, but they have they change jobs every 2 or 3 years, or they're changing industry every 5 years. And that just shows the, diversity of that person's experience, really.
Yeah.
And if we're really truthful, the days where people are in an organization for decades, unfortunately, they don't seem realistic anymore. And that's not because there aren't great companies out there, because there are, right? But it's just that things are so quick to change. And some companies, let's be honest, they won't last that long, because the industry, if you look at COVID, for example, there's a lot of change already. But COVID aside, we were talking about this the other day as well, right? Uncertainty is actually the norm. And we just forget that. And this, and again, it's another label, right?
Yeah. And so if you have people in your company that have experience of change quickly adapting to change and learning and going forward, these people can be actually really useful in this.
It's an in-demand skill. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really interesting that if you label it as something that it's, this person is not consistent. They may leave whenever they want, or whatever meanings we attach to that, it's actually, we are losing.
Yeah, because the truth is, like, when you talk about resiliency, like, that person has got to have an amazing amount of emotional intelligence, right? Quick learner, fast on their feet. So, yeah. And what are you saying? How, with a variety experience background, I bring a broad perspective on it. You
Absolutely.
name it. Yeah. So,
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? When I hear organizations all the time, and I was part of that, some of these organizations saying, yeah, we're not really good at dealing with change and uncertainty. But then the people who were hiring were, again, they weren't very, they hadn't really had that experience. But not to say that you shouldn't hire inexperienced people, but you should, again, it's hiring a diverse set of people. Hiring really young people because they're really malleable and they're deeply creative straight out the gate. They may not have, the diligence and the structure already embedded in them because they need to learn that. But if we, if you put the brakes on as a hiring manager, you just have to realize you were there yourself, And I try and remember that then when I see there's a few.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to cut you off. But then on the other side, right? Just because you're an old person, like you're, 50, 60 years old, that doesn't mean that you're not creative or that you can't learn quickly, or
Absolutely.
that you're, you can get
that
into
you
the
can't,
flow of technology. Yeah.
and that you can't change the way you think, because I've heard, we were doing a research with leaders in companies, and so we spoke a lot with younger people as well, and so it was interesting to see that lots of young people see the barrier in between them and older people. They have this idea of they just won't listen. They won't change. It takes them too long to change something. So therefore, and so because of that label, they are not even connecting. They're not going there because there is an idea that what's the point? They won't listen anyway. They're just these old people sitting there in management, and nobody's listening to us. And then you don't try. And there is so your idea doesn't go through. You're just widening and in making this gap even larger in between yourself and
no
them.
trust on the team. And transference, I think, is what you're talking about too, right? We talked about that in Clubhouse last week, where sometimes, as an older or a younger person on a team, you'll be like, oh, that person's like my daughter, or that person's like my dad, or my uncle or my grandfather, you know what I mean? And it's like, or that person's just human, and you're at work, you're not at home. And and just take the person for face value, instead of entering in with a label. So I guess we came up with more labels, right? So that's ageism. We didn't really dive too much into sexism, but
we will over time. We have 12 episodes. We have whole year to get there.
Yeah, and for the people listening or watching, we're going to be on Clubhouse each week, and we really want to really unpack some of the topics that you think are meaningful for you, or, maybe your organization struggling with a particular thing related to diversity inclusion. We'd love to hear from that.
Yeah, I just read a comment from Hal. Mental plasticity evolves with experience and age.
That's true.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting is that that was a myth broken ages ago, that with the loss of neural cells that we lose memory, and that all old people are senile and they forget, and but actually what we found out in neurology is that yes, we do have less nerve cells, but we don't even need that many. But what happens is that a connection in between these cells improves and enlarges in number over years. So actually making coming up with the ideas, creating, connecting stuff from one experience to another experience. And that's why we say that, older people are usually wise, because they have learned, they have made those connections that younger people haven't. So again, I'm not that...
Like, we've gone from basically, if we were to liken it to something that people can probably hold on to, it's like we've gone from Wi-Fi to a hard connection, basically, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. And so, thinking that because somebody is older can't come up with the ideas, or doesn't want to change, or can't change. I mean, there are people that are uncomfortable with change, but that has absolutely nothing to do with their age. They could be 15, 20, 30, 50. It's the same thing. So it's not the label, it's not the age group, it's the person. And so if you're open to it,
And just to connect the dots in a meaningful way in real life, many companies we speak to in Berlin, because we deal with a lot of clients who are in the startup scene, they're missing a massive trick. And it's innocent, because they just didn't pre-bake that into, when they're scaling up these companies really quickly. I'm like, where's the diversity in age? And they're like, well, it's a young dynamic company. And I'm like, but what about putting an old experienced person who's cut the teeth in operations? It'll stop all this chaos in its tracks, and you can go even faster. And they're like, wow, I didn't think of that. So that's the thing. I mean, just if anyone's listening who's in that scene, it's just find more older people, because you'd be surprised.
Wiser people.
Older, wiser, anyone who's cut the teeth in your kind of industry, but they might not have the technical know-how. But that's something, I mean, we talked about this before. I worked in many different industries, and I didn't know anything about the industry when I first was recruited into it. But what's transferable time and time again, if you look underneath the labels, is that rich experience, that resilience they built up, that connecting the dots and being able to critically think and drive innovation. That comes with diversity of age, right?
Indeed. So I'm so excited that we've started this podcast to have these conversations. And, like we've already mentioned 1 or 2 times, we have these chats on Clubhouse on Thursday afternoons or evenings, depending on where you are in the world, at 2 p.m. Eastern time and 8 p.m. Central European time. So, please join us tomorrow. Yes, that is tomorrow at this time, and we'll chat it up and hear from you a little bit more about what labels you're attaching to yourself and others, so that you can be on your journey to unlearn those labels. And I want to thank Natalie, who has been with her little one, who's not allowing her to type, but allowing her to listen, and her little one is benefiting. See, we're already helping the next generation. And Hal, thank you so much. Crystallization of thought from one's experience. Yeah, definitely. So close us out, Peter and Mira.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will be here soon again.
Yeah, and if you can, join us tomorrow. Thanks.
Thank you, and good evening.
Bye.